All right, we have a Trey Murphy injury update. I'll tell you when we can expect to see him back on the court for the New Orleans Pelicans. And plus, does this put more pressure on the team, on Zion, on Brandon Ingram? In your questions in a live episode of Locked On Pelicans, let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcast and here live on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Thursday for the live show at 7 p.m. Central. We do these every Thursday during the off season. So I appreciate y'all being here, making Locked On Pelicans part of your routine, part of your day, whether you listen once a week, couple times a week, or if you really want to support the channel, become an everydayer. I see so many of y'all saying it in the chat there. We'll get to your questions and everything. It's going to be a lot of fun. We got the Trey Murphy update, and this is rather important for the New Orleans Pelicans. So I appreciate y'all being here with me, Evander Fargo, everydayer. Jose Hasburn, what up, Jake, everydayer? I love it here. Silverwolf says, what's up, Jake? And Pels crew. Jessica Anderson, an everydayer. Denzel, Allen, everydayer from Miami by way of the Bahamas. We can definitely say hi at the home opener. Kevin Byers, hola, Jake. Missed last week. Hated it, but you're here now. That's the important thing. Nola G, Mr. Everydatter is what he always says. So I'm excited that y'all are here with me and hanging out. For your second listen, by the way, I don't know, Saints schedule season starts on Sunday. Go check out Locked On Saints, Ross Jackson, who I'm going to hang out with tomorrow, Friday. It's going to be a lot of fun. He's going to give you everything you need to know about the black and gold. So let's get into the Trey Murphy injury update. The Pelicans put out a statement today for immediate release, and I'll read it to you here. Quote, the New Orleans Pelicans announced today that forward Trey Murphy III underwent a successful partial meniscectomy, I think that's how you pronounce that, and received a biologic injection in his left knee this afternoon. The surgery was performed by Dr. David Altchek at the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York. Murphy III is expected to make a full recovery and will return to basketball activities in approximately 10 to 12 weeks. Okay. That is the key right there. That is the key of 10 to 12 weeks. So we now have a timeline, a timetable for when we might see Trey Murphy kind of getting back to basketball activities. 10 to 12 weeks, if you're looking at this, puts it somewhere from, say, the middle of November to the beginning of December. 10 weeks from today, when we're doing the show, is 11/16. November 16th. If he somehow were to play after that, and hold that thought for a second, that's him missing the first 10 games of the regular season. All things considered, could be a whole lot worse. We'd like this timeline to be shorter for sure. You know, sometimes the timeline on this can be 4 to 6 weeks. It's also the Pelicans. I wonder if they're just also partially putting out a longer timeline because they know how things tend to go with them. They run into some PR issues with that too. That's not necessarily to say I know anything like that, because I don't, but I wouldn't be necessarily shocked. Basically what Trey Murphy had was they trimmed part of the meniscus. This was not fully removing it or anything like that. You know, you really can't do much repair on meniscus injuries. There's not enough blood flow to the area for the body to kind of heal it. So you have to just kind of trim out, cut down, shave down the part that's not working. And that's what it sounds like Trey Murphy went with. So just getting this done now, not waiting, I think is the smart move. It's going to get him back out there on the court sooner. If it's, say, not the middle, but like the start of December, you're looking at him missing, that's where things get a little bit rougher. So he's saying we're missing 10 games or so there. That could put him to missing the first 20 games of the season. So expect him somewhere in that range, I think. Maybe a little bit beyond that if things kind of go poorly. Because It's 10 to 12 weeks to return to basketball activities. That's kind of the key there. That doesn't mean 10 to 12 weeks until he's back into the lineup, into the rotation. He's going to have, we all love this phrase, right? A ramp up period. That's not going to happen immediately. That for the Pelicans is usually 2 weeks minimum. So if it's on the longer end of things, you're looking at potentially mid-December to beginning of January, depending on how, cautious they want to take things. It's not ideal because he was going to be an important player for the team this season. There was a big question out there, right, of who starts? Herb Jones, or should they start Trey Murphy with the shooting that he provides? And when you talk to people around the league, they're really high on Trey Murphy. They feel he has, all-star potential in him. Everyone thinks this dude is awesome. I talked about it in the show on Wednesday. There's always kind of like a hipster NBA player that NBA media loves, and they kind of like hype up, be like, oh, you're not watching this guy enough. This is kind of a fringe MVP candidate or something like that. I once did a show, Locked On NBA, with Ben Golliver, who I think is with the Washington Post now, formerly Sports Illustrated. Awesome dude. And he called... This is a number of years ago. This is probably like 2016, 2017, called like Karis LeVert, the hipster MVP pick when he was with the Brooklyn Nets before he suffered an injury. So Trey Murphy was kind of that guy. It had been Mikal Bridges before that, Karis LeVert before that. There's probably one or two other guys that I'm kind of forgetting in there with things that people just like love, but isn't like a superstar. Trey Murphy was kind of getting that buzz around the league. It's pretty great that it's the dude on the Pelicans here, right? Inferno says no more time changes. I'm assuming you mean timeline changes here, or is it that we're doing 7 this week and we were at 6 p.m. last week? That was more I had to just do other shows and things. But hopefully it's just you don't see this timeline getting pushed back. Hopefully they can kind of just like stick to this and nail it because, yeah, that's one of those things. Inferno says it's hard to trust the Pels injury timelines. Correct. A lot of that mainly is around Zion, which also comes from Zion and his camp and kind of what they want to see done and things like that. I can assure you on all of that. Hold on as I adjust my camera settings here, I realized. And there we go. That, hopefully this will be more straightforward with Trey, and I wouldn't be shocked if they're kind of putting a slightly longer timeline, as I said earlier, on this to try and avoid some of this. Nola G says, let's be honest, Trey will be out 12 weeks and ramp up for another 3 weeks. Hope not, but don't plan on seeing him before the All-Star break. Right? Like that's kind of the question is exactly how long is the ramp up period going to be? It's going to be at least 2 weeks. That's usually how this team kind of does it. So hopefully he's returning to basketball activities on the 10-week plan, comes in 2 weeks, and then you can see him in the lineup around the beginning of December here. Denzel Allen says, realistically, in my opinion, this puts a lot of pressure on the training staff, especially because of all of our changes. I said that on Wednesday, right? Like, here's their test. Here is their test. They have reportedly revamped the player performance and care team staff, and that is... They did that because they weren't happy with the results. And look, some of the players weren't happy with some of that, beyond just Zion, too. And I think if you talk to people around the league, they do think that Aaron Nelson maybe like isn't as cutting edge, isn't as good as he used to be. It's tough to really know because we don't see so much of this stuff, but that's something I've heard told to me by other folks around the NBA. Doesn't mean he's bad or anything, just not like the vaunted Phoenix Suns training staff. So if you're changing that, well, if you get Trey Murphy back out there on the timeline, on the early end of the timeline, you've done your job, and it looks like those were smart moves to do. So that's hopefully what we'll end up seeing happening. But this is a true big test for them. Silver Wolf says they needed the revamp. I agree. You just had to do something differently. They need also, need the players to kind of buy in on that sort of stuff too. Trey, though, as I said, to wrap this segment up here, and we can kind of get into other things with the team and who needs to step up, all those things. I saw a question about Jordan Hawkins in there too, Kyra Lewis Jr., all of that. Like, what's the rotation going to look like without Trey? We'll get into that next. I completely forgot the point that I was going to make. Oh, well. Well, look, Trey is a hard worker, isn't he? You've seen all of the clips and the workout videos and things with Team USA on the select team and other things, right? That is something that I think will aid him. Like, that dude has a work ethic and wants to be an amazing, top end NBA player. When you see this injury, this is a setback for him right now, certainly, but one that it feels like he will be able to overcome. And I don't think this is going to influence his career that much in the long term. So coming up next, let's talk about more of the rotation. Jordan Hawkins, Kyra Lewis Jr., Dyson Daniels and their roles and things like that. We can get into your questions about trades and everything. I see one in there about Jonas. We'll get into that in the third segment when we really dive into the mailbag. So all of that and more in a live episode of Locked On Pelicans. That's going to be coming up in the next segment here. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL season is actually starting right now. It's going on right now. So get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers, so if you are a FanDuel customer, you get something too. All customers who bet $5 get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. You want to be able to watch those games on the go? Right there, $100 off. So now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on anything from the spreads to player props and more. Get in on that Tulane versus Ole Miss game. Arguably the second most important, biggest game in Yeoman Stadium history. I'm going to be there, decked out in green, yelling roll wave. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. So visit FanDuel. Go support the green wave right there. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and the official sports betting partner of Locked On. Thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday. We'll be back to 5 days a week starting the week of like the 16th, 18th. Basically, it's like 2 more weeks and we're there. One more week, and then we go back to 5 days a week, starting on the week of like the 18th or the 25th, something like that. So maybe it's 2 weeks, I forget. But we'll be back before you know it to 5 days a week, the #1 Pelicans podcast, talking everything hoops here, everything Pels that you want to know in a pivotal season, right? Let me know in the YouTube chat right now, do you think this is arguably like the most important season they've ever had? Because if it doesn't go well, do they need to dismantle things? What do you do? So does kind of the future of the franchise really hinge on what they do this year? I'm curious what you think. Let me know. And if you're an everydayer, shout it out in the comments. You get shouted out here, and we'll get back into all of that in another minute. And of course, for your second listen, go check out Ross Jackson. I'm going to tell him if you're not listening to a show, I'm seeing him tomorrow. We're hanging out. It's like the nicest dude ever, and I'm so happy that he is here in New Orleans. Mr. Bird says, Pelicans Nation members in here from Facebook. I see y'all. That's awesome. Thank you all for making Locked On Pelicans part of your day. Kevin Byer says, any other player health issues? Not that we're aware of, right? Not that there's anything we've heard. Who knows if we get surprised at Media Day, which has happened before with the Zion news. I was there a couple of years ago when he missed the whole season. Sitting next to Andrew Lopez of ESPN, Will Guillory, right? Like all of them. And literally no one knew anything about the Zion injury till David Griffin said that during his media availability. And everyone was kind of like, what? Like what just happened here? And that was that. Nola Star Bar says, everything I read about a partial meniscectomy surgical procedure says full recovery, even for athletes, 4 to 6 weeks. Why the 10 to 12 week timeline? Ross Jackson just texted me. I guess Ross Jackson is in here. Ross, you can say hi. He knows I'm going to tell on y'all if you don't go listen to Locked On Saints as your second listen here. Benefits of doing the live show, I can laugh and get instant reactions from people. There was also that if you listen to the Wednesday show about the Christian Wood signing with the Los Angeles Lakers, go listen to the last like 30 seconds of the Wednesday episode of Locked On Pelicans where I'm just laughing at a group text that is coming through, making fun of the Christian Wood signing with the Los Angeles Lakers, even if I actually think it's like kind of a good move for all of them. So the 10 to 12 weeks, we talked about this in the first segment. One, we don't know what the extent of the damage of the injury was, right? Like how much did they need to trim down? How much work did they need to do? Maybe this is a little bit more than anything else. I also would not be shocked if the Pelicans are padding the timeline out a little bit to be able to avoid any sort of like PR backlash that they've had with Zion's timeline getting pushed back or BI's timeline getting pushed back. And maybe it's better just to go to like, push it back. Like, I don't know, just build in some buffer. And worst case is if he comes back sooner, he comes back sooner. But now the expectations are set fairly low for everything. So I think that is like a big part of why they are doing all of that. But it's a good question, right? Usually this is measured in weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. When you get into 10 to 12 weeks, you're looking at a month or two then. That's not ideal, and it kind of changes the way we perceive, I think, some of this. But I wouldn't be shocked if they're just like, we don't want to deal with the headache that comes from people freaking out if and when something kind of comes up with all of this. So that's something to keep in mind. Benoit Robinson asks, hey, Jake, do you think this injury makes us trade Jonas for a shooter and salary cap relief? No, I don't think this injury to Trey is going to make them like force a trade for Jonas Valanciunas. You still need a center. Zion's not going to play that. You can't only roll in there, I think, with Larry Nance Jr. and Cody Zeller, even though I don't mind the Zeller signing, and you could, spot start him, starter in name only, as I've said. But I don't think you just move Jonas for a shooter. I also don't know if you can just simply get a shooter for Jonas Valanciunas. You also only have like one roster spot left on this team. They're going to kind of look who they want to use that on. Probably no one right now, given their $2.9 million into the luxury tax. So I don't think you make a knee-jerk reaction of saying, like trading Jonas Valanciunas for a shooter when it's like, oh, we still need Jonas, right? Trey's going to come back. He'll be okay. Noel G says, I've said it's padding the timeline, not padding the timeline 5 times now. No, I don't know anything on this. I haven't asked anyone about this today. When it comes to injuries, I kind of let people breathe and things like that. And I don't like to feel all creepy and digging. It's just 10 to 12 weeks is a little bit longer, but sometimes some of the surgical options, depending on the extent of it, mean it could be more. Right? 4 to 6 weeks is an ideal timeline. When you get into there and see the extent of the damage, which you don't know till you do the surgery pretty much, it could mean it's longer. Maybe this was like a significant trim, right? Maybe this was more invasive than we thought. So I think that means it could be longer. Like there's a number of reasons it could be, and we're speculating right now when it comes to all of that. So it's not always, who knows sometimes, right? There's just unknowns. And when it comes to injuries, you're just never going to get full transparency on it. I've said this, and I know it's like an unpopular take. I don't think they owe y'all transparency when it comes to injuries, right? When you buy your ticket and it's got like, the kind of code of conduct and what you get on the back of the ticket, transparency on some of the injuries is not part of that, unfortunately. A lot of this stuff is top secret, involves players' health. You don't get to see that. So easily they could be adding some extra weeks on here just to kind of give themselves some breathing room, or it could be that they, this is just an injury that was a little bit more significant than they think. Kevin Byers says, extending timeline adds yet additional pressure to meet the given timeline. I mean, yeah, if it goes beyond 10 to 12 weeks, we're going to be like, oh God, how bad is this sort of thing? Certainly. But if that's not what they think it's going to be and they made it longer and he comes back sooner, they look great, right? It just kind of depends. Like we just don't know. It's speculation, and it's tough when it comes to injuries and those things. Thomas Atkinson says, can't wait to see the new show you have coming up. I don't know what the new show is. We're going to potentially roll something out on Monday that Ross is doing over at Locked On Saints that I have access to now. That means I can interact with y'all in a whole lot of a better way than previously because Twitter sucks. So keep an eye out. We'll talk about that on Monday with everything when I do that show. So that's going to be a lot of fun. There was a comment I wanted to dive into. That was a good one here. I'm trying to find it. Hold on. We'll get there. There we go. Mick Vander Fargo, who gets the bump in minutes? Hawk might get some significant minutes, but we all know he won't get all of Trey Murphy III's minutes. Will it be Dyson or the Knife? I think those guys are in the rotation to start with. Let me find what I have my 10-man kind of projected rotation to be. And I talked about this on the show. This comes from when I did the Locked On Fantasy Basketball preview. And we'll go over this, hit a break here, and then we'll go into the next segment and talk more about it, right? Your starters aren't affected by this. CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, Zion, Jonas Valanciunas. That 5 set. 5 more people. Who are they? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. First one that I put down was Trey Murphy, Jose Alvarado, Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels, and Najee Marshall. The next guy I had, the 11th man that I could really see getting significant minutes, would be Jordan Hawkins if they need more shooting. Take Trey out. Hawkins steps in. I think that's who it's going to be. I think Najee Marshall was already in the lineup in the rotation. The problem with Najee and Dyson Daniels trying to kind of fill the Trey role, right? They view Dyson Daniels more as a guard. Najee's a wing too, but doesn't have the same size and skill set that Trey Murphy III has. Is neither of those guys are shooters, and that's kind of part of the problem. So they're going to give Jordan Hawkins minutes because they need the shooting. You have to rely on the rookie more so now. I think in terms of fit, he was a great pick. They need more shooting. He was arguably the best movement shooter in the draft. They're going to run a much more movement-based offense, so his skill set fits right in. But his skill set is shooting the ball and draining threes, and he's going to need to do that. It actually puts a lot more pressure on him, I think, than if this injury didn't happen and you could bring him along a little bit slower. If he starts shooting 32% from three and isn't doing well, they need him to do that because you don't have Trey Murphy making some of those threes. And so it's just a little bit rough when it comes to that sort of thing. Like, this puts more pressure on the rookie. In fact, this puts more pressure on everybody. Let's talk about that. Coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday. We'll just go back to saying that 5 days a week, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about the team. We do these live shows Thursday, 7 p.m. Central. My chance to interact with y'all. We'll have something rolling out on Monday where I can interact with y'all even more, and I am excited about it. Twitter's kind of awful. This is going to be the best way to interact with me other than the live shows. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans part of your day. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments here on YouTube. Shout it out. You deserve the shout out too, because you're supporting the channel every single day, and I love to see it. And of course, now for your second listen, Locked On Saints, Ross Jackson, who's in here and I don't think has said hi yet, and who I'm going to see tomorrow because the dude is awesome and he's fun. And Saints season starts. Go catch up on everything black and gold you need with the Locked On Saints podcast. Jake Warren says, also got back from the gym every day or here. Thanks for making it to the show, other Jake. That's awesome here. David Wag says, Pels just can't catch a break. No, this is like the most Pelicans news ever, isn't it? And that's just an unfortunate situation here. So let's get into some of your questions and other things. So I want to start with this before we get to the questions. This injury puts way more pressure on a number of people here. It puts more pressure on the player performance and care team to get him healthy and get him back out on the court sooner rather than later, right? It's also going to put more pressure on Zion and BI to stay healthy. This is super annoying because how much faith do you have in that? Maybe it's a lot, maybe it's not. There's no right or wrong answer to that sort of thing. But if Zion went down, if BI went down, we kind of trusted Trey to really like step in and maybe go for like 20 points per game pretty regularly if he was seeing a much higher usage rate because one of those guys was out. Well, you don't have kind of that back up to rely on here, so it puts more pressure on everyone else. I don't mind some of the depth that this team has, but I wouldn't call it necessarily great. I'm not relying on Najee Marshall to hit three-pointers. That's why we were talking about Jordan Hawkins, the rookie, needing to do that. So there's more pressure on him. This just puts, in a very important season, more pressure on everybody. There's a bit of a make or break to this with a number of the guys on the team, with some of the people within the organization, I think. And well, that just got a little bit tougher. And as Silverwolf says it, right? Feels like this is make or break year for a lot of people in and around the Pelicans. Exactly. You know, Nick Evander Frago, I've been calling you Fargo, my bad, dude. Absolutely. Z and BI should be feeling the weight right now. Weight's probably not the right word to use there, but the pressure is definitely that. So a couple of y'all, including Nola G, says, will this injury increase EJ minutes? I don't think so yet. Like, I think they're going to let him play in the G League a good bit first. You know, he missed all of last season. He looked decent in Summer League, but I think they're going to not throw him into the fire of an NBA season, NBA schedule just yet. I don't think that actually would be good. I think you need him to kind of go through some like rookie moments, which is going to be better in the G League. You know, he can play a little bit on the wing. We'll see if we can get to that eventually, but I don't think he's going to be a guy getting minutes right off the bat. I didn't have him in the 10-man rotation. The 11th guy was going to be Hawkins. He probably would have been the 12th guy. Maybe if there's another injury, he'll see some spot minutes. But I definitely think, if you put him into the fire of an NBA season yet, after not having gone through that, you'd like him to get some more ramp up and a little bit more experience in just playing. But he's been around the team a lot. The work ethic he has, what people have been saying about him is a wonderful thing. And I, as you know, had him in my top 20 on my draft board, and he fell to the Pelicans in the second round in the 40s. So I'm very high on him, and I'm excited to see what he will be doing. I don't know. That's a lot of pressure to put on him, right? Let him kind of get back into the swing of things after basically not playing like competitive serious basketball for a year. And so that, I don't think you want to set guys up to fail in some of these things. Stephanie Wilson says, do you think they're going to move Jonas before the season begins? Not at this point. Trades don't really get done right now. Maybe something happens, but in general, I think this is the roster they're going to roll into the season with. I think they'll eventually look to try and move him at the trade deadline. If they can't, then I think they're going to try and sign him to an extension. And I wouldn't even be shocked if he gets an extension before. I don't think you want to roll into the season with him as an expiring deal and potentially walking for nothing. Lock him up. He's a useful player. He's good. They don't use him properly, but maybe then that puts the onus on the coaching staff to try and use him properly rather than trading him because he just doesn't fit what you're doing. This goes both ways, I think. Rob McCoy says, JV definitely staying now. Look, you need more offense. He gives you that sort of thing. Jake Warren says, do you think Jonas will be shooting more threes with the new motion offense? Maybe. He makes threes when he's open at times. He's not elite at it, right? He isn't like a guy that spaces the court in the sense that teams cover him out there. They're not. They're going to let him launch those like kind of catapult shots, right? So I don't think you're going to see him shoot more threes because I don't know if it's actually the most effective use of him out there. Put someone else who's a better three-point shooter if that's what you're trying to do. I think you'll see him involved in more actions, dribble handoffs, operating out of the high post around the free throw line. That's something that James Borrego does, and that's something that I think you'll see him more involved in other ways, but it won't necessarily be three-point shooting and things like that. So I think that's where you'll see him more involved with everything. Aramis Jones says, Jake, do you think Brandon Ingram is better than Paul George? No, probably not. I don't know if that's going to be popular in here. Paul George has missed a lot of time, so has Brandon Ingram, but Paul George does it on the defensive side of the ball too. There's plenty to make fun of Paul George for, playoff P and all of those things, when that's not a thing that he does at all. But this is a guy that, averaged last season 23.8 points per game, 24 the year before that, 23, 22. When you look at him basically from when he came back from his injury, his career numbers, 24 points per game. He shoots the three ball at a high rate, 8 attempts per game at 39%. Brandon Ingram doesn't take doesn't take that amount of 3-point shots. He doesn't do it defensively like Paul George does, and Paul George, dishes the ball too. So I put Paul George above Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram can get there, certainly. I think Brandon Ingram is very, very good. So I don't know if that's like a knock on him to say he's not as good as Paul George. He can get there. This ties into Black Order. Why are a lot of people disrespecting Ingram, saying guys like Reeves is better? I think when you look at, I've done a couple shows on this with Brandon Ingram, and look, their struggles with Team USA, let's call them what they are. I don't really worry or care about it, right? I just did this show on Monday. Was it Monday? Where I'm like, I'm not stressed about this because he isn't playing the kind of similar role, right? Reeves is succeeding because the coaches have been put him into a role that fits him. Brandon Ingram is not being put in that situation. So this is less about Brandon Ingram, more just kind of about how the makeup of Team USA. And when Brandon Ingram comes back here, he's going to have a better season than Austin Reeves will. And I think that's ultimately what matters. I don't read too much into the Team USA stuff. I host the Locked On NBA podcast with John Krause, the Locked On Celtics, on Wednesdays. And we were talking about it. We have like a signature segment that's real or fake that we do every week. We pose a question. And is that statement real or is that statement fake? This week it was like, will these FIBA performances carry over to the NBA? And to me, that's like very fake. When you look at some of these players and how they're playing, and they're playing amazing in FIBA, are they going to be amazing in the NBA? Oh, heck no. Billy Hernangomez was the FIBA Eurobasket MVP a year ago, right? The team hyped him up all offseason, calling him MVP, making him a cake. You don't make cakes for any minor achievement and things like that. And you couldn't get minutes in the NBA on this Pelicans team. He was okay when he got minutes, but he wasn't like MVP level, right? So when you look at like Austin Reeves playing amazing, okay, is he going to have a similar role for the Lakers? When you look at some of these other guys, if they're not going to be playing the same kind of role, that doesn't really translate over really with anything. So Brandon Ingram struggles in the same vein aren't going to translate over because he's not going to be in kind of the same role here. And so that's kind of how I view that. David Wags says, watching Kansas City versus Detroit on TV and listening to Jake talk about the Pelicans, does it get any better? It'll get better on Sunday when the Saints win, right? When they beat the Titans, that's going to get a little bit better. Maybe we'll also have a show out then for you as well. Arrow, Gant1 Green. Jake, have you seen footage of high school player Cooper Flagg yet? I've seen a little bit. I don't do a lot of like draft or scouting until like we kind of know, because I just have so much other stuff I need to do when it comes to the NBA and everything. So I don't look too much at it, but I know there's a couple of guys. He looks like one that are going to be very, very good, I think, in the NBA. There's a lot of talent out there, and it's really nice to see that kind of translating to the NBA. At one point we were looking at like they need to contract a team or two because there's not enough like NBA level talent. Now we need to expand because there's so much. That's a great problem to have when it comes to all of this. Denzel Allen says, if Hawkins lives up to the hype, can you see the team considering moving Trey to both avoid the luxury, to avoid the huge contract and luxury tax? No, I think they love Trey. I wouldn't move Trey. If Hawkins lives up to the hype, I would still move Hawkins because he's more one-dimensional compared to Trey, who does a whole lot of other things at a greater position of need. You keep Trey at all costs. You keep Trey at all costs, and I think that's something that you'll see them try and do. Like you'll move on from CJ, I think, before you worry about Trey, and you'll figure it out, because I think Trey has like that high of potential. When a guy like Zach Lowe is saying he's like could be an all-star, and Zach Lowe is one of the smarter basketball people out there, I think that says something. When there's this much hype around him from like smart NBA people that I trust, I wouldn't move Trey Murphy at all. Tokyo DR says, I love this podcast. Thank you, my person. I don't want to assume here. So I appreciate you joining the show, being part of everything. Benoit Robinson says, Trey not going anywhere. Of course not. Frago says, any news on the two-way contracts? Nothing yet. I think they kind of want to wait. They're going to go through training camp. They have EJ Liddell on one right now. They have two other open ones. We'll see how those end up shaking out. Sebron could be one. It could be Liam Robbins. He didn't get to play in Summer League. People were very hyped about him, a center, defensive rim protector. We'll see what, other players could go out there and be, but I think they're going to take their time on that. There's no rush to sign anyone to any of those sorts of things here. Jake Warren says Trey could be the future of this franchise. Like, yeah. Or part of, at least part of the future, maybe not like the core guy, but he shows so much talent. That draft pick's going to end up looking so good for New Orleans. As I said, I'm not really worried long-term about this injury for him. I think this will be a minor setback on the way to a very strong career. And with that work ethic he has, like, is there really any question at all that he's going to not come back fully healthy and be the player he was before? Also, when you look at his game, right? The concern here and what the meniscus does is kind of a shock absorber, piece of cartilage for your knee. And, if you lose some of that jumping up and down, playing a game like basketball can be rough. But Trey's game, worst case is catch and shoot guy. And he's going to be really good at that. And that is going to be just fine in the NBA with that size. But, his game's not like insane athleticism like, say, Zion's is. And Zion had a similar injury to this. Took him longer, but he came back, and his career has kind of been, I don't want to say fine, but it hasn't been impacted by that meniscus injury his rookie year. So this is an injury that players recover from. When you look at like the history of this injury, Chris Paul had one. Kawhi Leonard's had that. Like, this one is fairly common occurrence. And so I think everything here is going to be like just fine when it comes to Trey. Jake Warren says, so weird to think that I'm 3 months older than Trey. I'm 37. How do you think I feel about basically the entire roster here? That's so weird when you start looking up people. I remember being like, kid, you look at these players. Oh, that dude's 24. And you're like, I'm 15. That's cool. He's like a huge adult. And now all of a sudden I'm older than everybody. It's not fun to age and go through all of that. So way to make me feel old here and everything. After seeing recent pictures, I wonder where Zion is as far as weight. Here's what I say with Zion and the weight. I don't care. Like, I don't care. Be at whatever weight. Just be healthy and playing and doing what you need to do. He looks trim. He looks cut. That's great. But he also needs to focus on flexibility, the way he lands when he plays, and, to kind of protect his body. Those are things he's worked at, by the way. Landing with bended knees so you can kind of absorb some of the shock and the things, right? Go back to the Phoenix Suns series where he wanted to play and he was throwing down those dunks on YouTube and things like that. Stephanie Wilson says Larry Nance had one last year. Also, I think he did. Had meniscus injury, came back, missed a little bit, or the season before when it came to the trade and everything. So he's great. I'm so happy right now, y'all. I'm so happy. We'll get back to the point that I was making. I was waiting for ABJ504 to be here and say comment. There are everydayers, and then there is ABJ504, who literally every day on the show, on YouTube, just writes comment. Takes 2 seconds to do, is as consistent as they get. All 82 games here for ABJ504, so I appreciate you being here and making Locked On Pelicans part of your day. So Zion's weight, like, I don't care. Be 400 pounds. If you can play well and be out there on the court and not get hurt and you're being effective, I'm cool with it. Like, I really, really am. People focus too much on the weight. I'll go on the radio and people are like, what do you think about it? I'm like, I don't care. I just do not care as long as you are healthy and playing to your best of your ability. The weight is less important than the other things that I think you're doing. If you're doing those other things, like, don't be 400 pounds, right? If you're doing all the other things and you're slightly above, let's say, a plain weight that you want, it'll end up being okay. Yeah, extra weight on some of the jumping you do going up and down puts more stress, torque, tension on your body, certainly. But there's ways to mitigate that too with other things. And that's the stuff that I don't think Zion was doing before. Go back to that Dime magazine interview with him, Brandon Ingram, and CJ. And CJ's like, I stretch all the time. And they're like laughing at CJ. And it's like, come on, y'all. Break out the bands, do some stretching, all of those things. That's the most important thing. So I don't care about his weight. I care about all the other stuff he's doing. And it looks like he's doing that. It looks like he's doing that. As long as he's doing that, 2 thumbs up from me. I'm thrilled. I don't care about anything else. So hopefully that's what we see here when it comes to Zion Williamson next season. See, McEvander Frago says Zion needs to be stretching with Uncle CJ. Exactly. Those sorts of things. Brendan says, if Zion is struggling with injury again, how do you feel about him on the team? Zion is my favorite player and why I chose the Pels and really started getting invested in the NBA and the Pels. This goes to what I've said a couple of times here, and it comes down to it's make or break year. Look, they've looked at moving on from him. You have those conversations even if you aren't actively doing it, right? Like, what's his value? What could we get for him if we want to trade him? You have binders of this sort of like thought process and material and things like that, right? And, look, there were some talks around him no matter what they're going to spin it as when it comes to Scoot Henderson and things like that. As far as I know, some medicals were exchanged with the Portland Trailblazers. I can't fully confirm that, but, there were talks about it, whether an official offer was made or not, right? You get into semantics on this stuff and it's kind of BS. You've had Mark Stein report that last offseason they kind of explored some talks and moving him and things like that to try and gauge the value. And I just don't think the value for him around the league is where they want. And they go, okay, well, we're just going to keep him and roll with it. But if you don't get a pretty fully healthy season, 65 plus games to qualify for end of season awards, let's make that the minimum. Like, you just can't keep doing this, right? At a certain point, it's always something. It's always something. And how tiring and exhausting is that? Can you build a franchise around someone with, it's always something? Whether it's him, whether it's bad luck, whatever it is, whether it's y'all too, right? Not you, but the team. That gets exhausting. And can you build a franchise around that? I don't know. And at a certain point, you've just got to be like, this didn't work. Circumstances outside of our control, bad luck. Player didn't want to do it. Maybe we even made mistakes too, and we just need to wash our hands of it and start fresh because we're not getting anywhere with this. And then it'll suck if things go together for him in another location, but it just wasn't going to work here. You can look at Jackson Hayes as kind of like the poor man's version of this, right? He might actually be okay for the Lakers. I'm not fully sold on that sort of thing, but he might be. It was just never going to happen here in New Orleans, and he needed a fresh start, and the team was kind of sick of him too. So he might go and be great elsewhere, but it was never going to work here for whatever reason. And so that's something that I think you have to look at with Zion Williamson after this season if there's just more injuries and other stuff too. You just need to try and put a consistent winner out there. And can you do that when you just don't have the same kind of, when you just don't get the player out there doing the thing, right? As David Wag says, the best ability is availability. That's pretty important when it comes to all of this here. Denzel Allen says, what I find funny is I remember CJ saying Zion with jokes about the kind of stretching he does, and now Zion is doing the exact same kind of stuff. Yup. Goes to show how CJ is changing the culture. I think that's CJ. I think it's also just kind of the outside pressure finally getting to Zion. He's been in the news this offseason for like the wrong reasons, and I think he finally wanted to just kind of like change the narrative more. You need to do that by talking a little bit more than he does. But if you're not going to talk, go do it with your play on the court by being healthy, by working out, by being around the team. Now we can't question his commitment. Those sorts of things. And there you go with all of that here. David Wags also says 37. Damn, you look good for your age. Thank you. I appreciate that. Wasn't fishing for compliments or anything here. Silver says, would you consider Zion situation different to Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, because they have some points on the board already? I mean, look, Kawhi Leonard has won a title. That's kind of important. Paul George has had some playoff success, maybe not with the team that they want here, the team that he's on, but like they've collected some skins. They're on the wall, right? There's been success. They get more of a benefit of the doubt than someone who doesn't. They also have an owner that wants to spend and willing to, do whatever it takes. You don't have the same kind of situation here in New Orleans. Maybe eventually Gayle Benson does that, but we're like, are they going to pay the luxury tax or not? Or that wouldn't even be a question with Ballmer and the Los Angeles Clippers. So like, it's definitely different for a lot of reasons when it comes to that. But look, if you can get the best version of Kawhi Leonard, we know he's a guy that will carry you to a championship. Okay, you wait a little bit longer for a guy like that because there is the track record there. A couple of y'all noticing the Legend of Zion shirt here. Oh yeah, I saw this. This shirt is like not the best shirt. It's kind of scratchy, like terrible material here, but I wear it for the show because this one is great and it's nerdy and I love it. I saw it on like Facebook, came across, and I like immediately bought it. And I do think then my like credit card got like scammed and hacked or something like that. So commitment to bring this one in here. All right, we're going to do one or two more questions, so get them in here. We got a little long today. We're almost 45 minutes, but that's because I'm having fun with y'all here. Michael Phillips asks, can we win a title with a healthy roster? We still moves away from that being a possibility. I think they can be competitive this year. If things break right, which is namely poor injury luck to your opponents and other teams in the West, I think this is a team that could make, with luck, the conference finals. The way I kind of look at a contender is, are you one of the final four teams in the league? Did you make the conference finals? Were you another series away? Were you one series win away from going to the NBA finals? That's kind of a contender to me. I don't know if this team's there just yet. The Trey Murphy injury certainly impacts that. But there's a lot of talent here, and they could compete for the top four in the West. That's like half the battle to getting to the conference finals, I think. So I think there's still maybe a move away, but we've never really seen what this team is absolutely capable of fully healthy. It could surprise us. It could be better than what we thought. And that's what I'm hopeful we'll end up seeing here. Jake Warren says, do you think that Gayle Benson not paying the luxury tax will always hold the team back? I mean, not paying the tax you're not going to win. They're one of 2 franchises in NBA history to never pay the luxury tax. Look at all of the title winners. I've done the show of running them down. They pay the tax. Contenders pay the tax. It's as simple as that. If you're in a small market and you're playing with some disadvantages, and this team is, and that's not Gail Benson's fault, you have to time it right. Is this the time? We're going to kind of find out this season. That's why I call it make or break. Maybe it is, maybe not. I'm sure they'll pay it at some point. They're going to have to if they truly want to contend. And that's just kind of how it goes. But are they going to pay it every single year, even if the team's garbage? No. But are they willing to pay it when the time is right or the time is close to being right? That's the true question. And that's what we'll kind of find out in the next year or two when it comes down to it. And so I'm kind of excited to see how that's going to go. I don't know. It's going to be a big question. All right, that's going to do it here. I see a couple of other questions. We can get those to another live show. And, of course, we'll be back to 5 days a week before you know it. Tune into Monday's show. We're going to roll something out for another way for y'all to interact with me. They do it over at Locked On Saints. It seems like a big success. I'm even part of it. And I can't wait to be able to hang out with y'all more. The live shows we'll keep doing in the off season here. And yeah, it's going to be a whole lot of fun. We'll be back to 5 days a week before you know it. Media Day is coming up. I believe it's October 2nd, if that's not been put out there yet, but I think every team's is October 2nd. So we're a couple of weeks away before Media Day, training camp, preseason. We're about a month away from the first preseason game. It's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Become an everydayer and never miss anything going on with the team. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Back on Monday for y'all with the show around Zion Williamson, unless we get some other news, because the Trey news kind of killed everything this week. So I appreciate y'all being here. I appreciate the everydayers. Thank you again so much for making Locked On Pelicans part of your day. And I'll see y'all on Monday. Enjoy the weekend and roll wave. Beat Ole Miss.